A father's protective instinct just slammed into the highest constitutional power in the land. And the resulting fallout is literally rewriting American history.
It really is. I mean, it's a collision of executive power on a scale that we just haven't seen in our lifetimes.
Right. So I want you to put yourself in this incredibly narrow, chaotic, 24-hour window. We are talking about the final ticking clock of the Biden administration, and it slams directly into the exact moment Donald Trump's moment term begins.
Just a massive, immediate transfer of power.
Exactly. So in that tight time frame, you have outgoing President Joe Biden issuing this shocking wave of sweeping preemptive pardons. He throws this massive legal shield over his son Hunter, his extended family members, and, key political allies.
Yeah, a huge group of people.
And then the clock strikes noon. Power transfers. And incoming President Donald Trump immediately triggers his own massive use of executive power. He issues these immediate blanket pardons for all the January 6th defendants. Just boom. Two vastly different presidencies wielding the exact same absolute power, just crashing into each other.
The shockwaves from this are touching every single part of our political and justice systems. I mean, you are basically watching real-time stress tests of the Constitution.
So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking the history, the hard statistics, and the legal precedents of executive mercy.
We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We've got a formidable stack of sources today. We're pulling reporting from CBS News and Newsweek, deep polling data from Monmouth University, and some pretty dense legal abstracts from Virginia Tech and DPCE online.
But before we get into the mechanics of what just happened, we need to set a really crucial ground rule for you, the listener.
Yes, we do, because the temperature on this topic is just boiling right now.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources we are looking at today document highly charged political actions from both the left and the right. So we need to be clear. We are absolutely not taking sides here.
Not at all.
We are strictly here as your impartial guides. Our only goal is to convey the facts, the data, and the ideas contained in this source material.
Right. We are just looking at how this power works, why it was used, and what it actually means for the country. Nothing more.
Exactly.
And, understanding the why means we really have to start by looking at the human element behind these massive legal decisions. Because you can't understand the constitutional earthquake without understanding the pressure cooker that caused it.
That makes sense. So let's jump straight to December 1st, 2024, and the pardon of Hunter Biden. Because this wasn't just like a standard pardon wiping away his gun conviction from June or his tax evasion plea from September.
No, not at all.
It was an incredibly broad, full, and unconditional blanket pardon covering an 11-year period, January 1st, 2014 to December 1st, 2024.
And that specific 11-year window is entirely deliberate.
How?
Well, it covers everything from his time on the board of the Ukrainian energy company Burisma, right through the depths of his struggles with addiction, all the way up to the present day. So it effectively blocks any future federal charges from being brought against him for anything, literally anything that occurred during that entire decade-plus time frame.
Wow. And getting to that signature was just an agonizing internal battle for the family, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because for months, Joe Biden stood in front of cameras and explicitly promised the American people he would not pardon his son. He really wanted to project total independence from the Justice Department. But the sources show that First Lady Jill Biden fundamentally rejected that strategy.
She was fiercely opposed to it. I mean, if you look at her CBS Sunday Morning interview and her memoir, View from the East Wing, she peels back the curtain on this deeply painful family dynamic.
What did she say?
She wrote that by Joe trying so hard to appear politically impartial, he essentially guaranteed that Hunter would face, in her words, the worst possible legal fate.
Because she felt he was being selectively prosecuted.
Yes, exactly. She argued Hunter was being aggressively pursued for things that people rarely face prison time for, like lying on a gun form while in the throes of addiction, or paying taxes late, which he subsequently paid back with penalties. Her quote to CBS was devastatingly blunt. She just said, "We just could not let our son go to jail."
Man, when you read the details from her memoir, the sheer exhaustion of that family is just palpable.
It really is.
Because it wasn't just the legal stress. Jill writes about that disastrous Atlanta debate, describing Joe looking bleary. She admits she thought he might be having a stroke, or that he looked like an AI hologram that was glitching out on stage.
Which is terrifying.
Right. And then, as surreal as it is, They went straight to a Waffle House afterward.
The contrast there is just jarring. You have the weight of the free world on one hand and the mundane reality of a late-night diner on the other. And the hits just kept coming for them.
Right, his health.
Yeah, just months after dropping out of the race, Joe is diagnosed with stage IV prostate cancer. And meanwhile, Jill actually gets fired from her teaching job of 40 years at Northern Virginia Community College.
Oh, wow. Why?
Because her grant funding dried up.
Jeez. It's a portrait of a family that just feels completely besieged. But let's look at the legal mechanics of this 11-year blanket pardon for a second, because it feels like a legal time machine to me.
A time machine?
Yeah. I mean, if the justice system is supposed to be blind, how can a president legally pardon someone for crimes they might have committed but haven't even been charged with yet?
So it sounds like a time machine, but legally it's actually the opposite. It's not rewriting the past. It's basically building an impenetrable wall against the future.
Okay, explain that.
Well, the Constitution's pardon clause is incredibly broad. The Supreme Court has historically interpreted the power as plenary, which means it's absolute and unqualified. So a preemptive pardon, which forgives crimes before charges are ever filed, is entirely constitutionally valid.
But why give the president that kind of unchecked power in the first place?
The underlying logic is that the power of mercy needs to be flexible enough to stop a prosecution that the president believes is fundamentally unjust or dangerously politically motivated before it even begins. It acts as a circuit breaker for the justice system.
Right. And that profound fear of a politically motivated justice system didn't stop with Hunter.
No, it definitely didn't.
Once the Bidens concluded the incoming administration was going to be weaponized against them, they realized their entire inner circle was exposed. So Biden didn't just pardon his son. He threw this massive umbrella over his siblings, his in-laws, his administration officials.
And notably, members of the January 6th Congressional Committee and investigators who had actually prosecuted Donald Trump.
The motivation there is key, right?
Yeah.
The Biden camp had a profound fear of retribution from the incoming Trump administration.
Exactly. And they weren't just guessing. They were listening to what was being said publicly.
Because Trump made campaign promises about retribution. You had incoming FBI Director Kash Patel publicly vowing on podcasts to go after political targets. You had incoming Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's a known loyalist.
Right.
They looked at this incoming Justice Department not as a neutral arbiter of the law, but basically as a loaded weapon aimed right at them.
Which is why they viewed these preemptive pardons as the only realistic way to shield their allies from politically motivated fishing expeditions.
Here is where I struggle with that logic, though, because it feels like a massive self-fulfilling prophecy.
How do you mean?
Think about it like building an underground bunker in your backyard.
Yeah.
If you build a bunker, your neighbors are going to assume you expect a war or that you have something to hide. By issuing these preemptive pardons to his political allies, doesn't Biden inadvertently make them look guilty in the court of public opinion? Doesn't it just validate his opponent's suspicions?
That is the exact critique legal scholars are raising right now. There is a famous 1915 Supreme Court case, Burdick v. United States, which suggests that accepting a pardon actually carries an imputation of guilt.
Right.
So by granting pardons to people who haven't been charged, you inherently create a cloud of suspicion over them.
So why take the pardon if it makes you look guilty?
Because the counter-argument, at least according to the Biden camp's internal logic, is survival. Defending yourself against a weaponized federal investigation, even if you are completely unequivocally innocent, can bankrupt you. It can destroy your reputation and ruin your life.
That's a good point.
They essentially ran a cost-benefit analysis and decided the bad optics of accepting a pardon were vastly preferable to the reality of spending years in court fighting the federal government.
Okay, so we've looked at Biden's actions and his motivations, but this whole story is about two presidencies colliding. Let's look at how Donald Trump has utilized this exact same power, because the statistics paint a picture of two entirely different governing philosophies.
Oh, the contrast in the numbers is staggering. During his time in office, Biden granted over 8,000 acts of clemency.
8,000, wow.
Yeah, but that massive number is largely driven by sweeping categorical pardons for thousands of people convicted of minor marijuana possession, as well as pardons for LGBTQ service members who were historically expelled from the military.
Whereas Trump, during his first term, used the power incredibly sparingly by comparison. He granted only 143 pardons and 94 commutations.
which really highlights a very different approach to executive mercy.
Wait, before we dive into who got those, let's clarify the jargon for a second for everyone. How exactly is a commutation different from a pardon? Is a pardon wiping the slate clean, while a commutation just lets you out of prison early?
That's a perfect way to describe it. A pardon is full forgiveness. It restores your civil rights, like the right to vote or own a firearm. And legally, it's as if the conviction no longer exists.
Okay, and a commutation.
A commutation leaves the criminal conviction on your record, but it reduces or eliminates the punishment. So it gets you out of a prison sentence, but you are still a convicted felon.
Got it. Okay, so Trump issues 143 pardons and 94 commutations in his first term. But the Virginia Tech and DTCE online legal abstracts point out that it's not the volume that's unusual, it's the specific recipients.
Right. A detailed study of those numbers found that 29 out of 34 of Trump's first-term clemency recipients were close personal or political connections.
Wait, 29 out of 34?
Yes. He utilized the power to reward allies who refused to testify against him in various investigations. He pardoned military contractors who had been convicted of murdering civilians. He pardoned Charles Kushner, the father-in-law of his own daughter.
Right.
And then, of course, the moment he took office for his second term, he issued the immediate blanket pardon for everyone involved in the January 6th Capitol riot.
Which sets up this incredible historical duality. Biden breaks precedent by becoming the very first president in American history to pardon his own offspring. And Trump pushes the boundaries by using the pardon power almost exclusively as a tool for political loyalty and personal connection.
Both are pushing the limits of the Constitution in opposite directions.
But do we have any historical precedents for actions this extreme?
We do, though they are pretty rare and highly controversial. For Biden's broad, preemptive pardons, the closest historical analog is Gerald Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon in 1974.
Because Nixon hadn't been criminally charged yet either, right?
Precisely. Ford issued a full, free, and absolute pardon to Nixon for any crimes he might have committed against the United States during his presidency.
But people were furious about that.
They were. But Ford's reasoning was that a drawn-out, sensational trial of a former president would just tear the country apart, and he wanted to heal the nation. It was a deeply unpopular move at the time, and arguably cost Ford the 1976 election. But he felt the preemptive pardon was a necessary shock to the system.
And what about Trump's blanket pardon for the January 6 defendants? Is there a historical match for clearing thousands of people involved in a single controversial event?
Legal experts often point to Jimmy Carter for that one. On his very first day in office in 1977, Carter fulfilled a campaign promise by issuing a blanket pardon to hundreds of thousands of men who had evaded the draft during the Vietnam War.
Hold on, though. I really struggle with that comparison.
Why is that?
Draft evaders were avoiding a war. They didn't violently storm a federal building, injure police officers, or disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. Illegally, how can scholars even compare dodging a draft to the events of January 6th? Doesn't a blanket pardon just ignore the severity of the underlying crime?
You've hit on the exact friction point of that comparison. They are really only similar in their mechanism, the use of a sweeping categorical pardon. But materially, there is a massive distinction, and Carter himself actually made this explicitly clear.
What did he say?
Carter's pardon explicitly excluded anyone who had committed acts of violence or who had deserted while in a combat zone. Trump's January 6 pardons, however, did not make that distinction. They covered everyone involved in the riot, regardless of whether they committed acts of violence against law enforcement.
Wow. Hearing all this history, I just keep coming back to a monarchy versus democracy analogy.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the founders literally fought a war to strip power from a king and give it to the people. Yet they deliberately wrote this prerogative of mercy into the Constitution. It's a tool straight out of the British Crown that essentially functions like a royal decree. Did the founders leave the pardon power this unchecked by accident?
It was not an accident at all. It was actually a heavily debated, calculated risk at the Constitutional Convention. George Mason was terrified of this clause. He warned the delegates that a president might use the pardon power to protect his own accomplices, or even himself, essentially creating an elected monarch who was above the law.
So why on earth did they keep it in?
Well, Alexander Hamilton won the argument. Hamilton believed that in times of crisis, rebellion, or national fracture, the slow, grinding wheels of the justice system just wouldn't be enough.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, the nation might need a quick, absolute way to offer mercy to restore peace. They knew the power could be abused for personal gain, but they believed the ultimate check on that abuse would be the voters and the threat of impeachment.
Well, if the ultimate check is the voters, We definitely need to look closely at the court of public opinion, because the numbers from the Monmouth University poll show that the voters are rendering a very harsh verdict right now.
Yeah, the data reveals a massive erosion of public trust. The American public is highly critical of how both of these presidents are wielding this authority.
Let's unpack what these statistics actually mean for you, the average voter.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a rejection of one party. Like, only 32% of Americans actually approve of Hunter Biden's pardon. 58% actively disapprove. And remember Joe Biden's argument that Hunter was facing the worst possible legal fate because of his last name? Well, the public flat out isn't buying it. Only 35% believe Hunter was treated more harshly due to his political connections, while 47% say he was treated just like anyone else in the system.
And the numbers are equally brutal on the other side. Looking at Trump's first-term pardons for close associates, only 29% of Americans approve, with a solid 56% disapproving.
Wow.
And regarding the blanket January 6 pardons, a massive 61% of the country disapproves, with only 34% offering support.
So what we are seeing is that clear supermajorities of the country just reject both of these approaches. But the poll highlights a very specific political fallout for the Democrats regarding the Hunter pardon. 57% of Americans say Biden's pardon of his son strips Democrats of their credibility when they try to criticize Trump's pardons.
That is the ultimate political cost of shattering a norm. I mean, even if the Bidens truly believe they were acting defensively against a weaponized system, once you cross that line and use the power to protect your own family, you forfeit the moral high ground. You can no longer credibly call out the other side when they shatter their own norms.
I want you to think about your own trust in the system as you're listening to this. When supermajorities of the country disapprove of how both the left and the right are using the highest constitutional tool of mercy, what happens to our collective faith in the rule of law? I mean, if the referee is seen as throwing the game for both teams, why would anyone feel obligated to play by the rules?
That is the exact danger legal scholars are sounding the alarm over right now. The entire justice system relies on a foundation of public respect. If the public permanently views the pardon power merely as a tool for cronyism, family protection, or partisan warfare, the legitimacy of the rule of law begins to crumble.
So let's step back and look at the whole board here. We started with a personal tragedy and intense family pressure. A first lady terrified of losing her son to a system she believed was out to get him, compounded by a president facing his own failing health and political twilight.
Yeah.
That human drama leads to an unprecedented 11-year preemptive blanket pardon for Hunter and a massive protective shield thrown over Democratic allies.
Which then immediately collides with Donald Trump stepping into office hours later, utilizing the exact same absolute authority to pardon the January 6 defendants and elevate his own loyalists.
Two presidents, two entirely different philosophies of governance, but one fiercely divided public that completely rejects how both men are wielding the power.
It is the ultimate irony, really. Alexander Hamilton designed the pardon power as a safety valve to prevent national fracture during a crisis. And today, that exact same valve appears to be the mechanism accelerating the fracture.
Which leaves us with a lingering question for you to explore on your own today. For over 2 centuries, this power was defended as the ultimate tool for mercy when the strict application of the law became unjust. But if we are now entering a permanent era where executive clemency is viewed simply as a weapon of partisan warfare, will a future generation finally attempt the seemingly impossible task of amending the Constitution to put a leash on the president's absolute power?
It's a profound question, and it really gets right to the heart of whether our democracy can survive the loopholes built into its own foundation.
A father's protective instinct collided with the Constitution, and we're all still feeling the shockwaves. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.